He woke up that morning and didn't know exactly what to think about what was ahead, but he knew that everything was going to be okay because it was another exciting day. Another exciting day to be able to go out and do God's work. Oh, Jonah just loved his job being a prophet of God for Israel. Being able to give different messages to the people, and every time the people saw him, oh, they loved him so much. Nothing but good things to say about him. Even his wife got tired of all the good things that were being said, and sometimes she would turn to him and say, so many good things are being said about you. Why don't you take some of those good things and put them into work here at the house? They both would chuckle and go about their daily chores and do what was needed. But Jonah scratched his head that one morning that he got a different message. It wasn't that he was supposed to go to this town or that town in Israel. The message really perplexed him. And he kind of pushed it off for a couple of days and came back again. And he said, you called me to Israel, Lord. Why is it that you're wanting me to go to the people that want to destroy us? Because you see, Nineveh at that time didn't like Israel. But even more than that, Nineveh was considered to be one of the worst cities of the time. Jonah wanted nothing to do with it. And even more, he started wondering if what he was doing really was God's calling and if he was really listening to God's voice. So the day came that Jonah decided that he was going to do something that he had never done before. Took his wife aside and he said, I'm going to take a vacation. I'll be back in a few weeks. Little did he know that that wasn't going to happen. His wife was kind of worried and concerned, but Jonah was known for pulling very interesting things, and so she didn't think anything of it. Jonah started walking the streets of his local town, and people were always very excited to see him, and a number of people came up to him that day and said, "Oh, Jonah, what word do you have for us from God?" And Jonah looked at them very scared. "Oh, I'm not going to Nineveh." And they're like, "Nineveh? We said nothing about Nineveh." Jonah started to run. Because he started in the back of his mind thinking, well, maybe these people actually know what God told me to do. And God's speaking through them too. He didn't realize that God was using every single person around him to actually do what he was supposed to do. Jonah kept going through that town and having his bag on his back, saying, I am going to run from this calling. I am not going to do what God has asked me to do. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Jonah kept walking and reached into his pocket to make sure that he had the money that he needed for this trip. And he wanted to make sure that he was going to the farthest place away from Nineveh as he could. So he got to the boat dock where all the people were selling different excursions and other things, and he started looking at the ships and going, okay, which one of these would be the best one where they will not know anything about me being on board? So he looked and he looked and he looked. I'm going to go with that one. So he went up, said, hey, how much would it be? The crew looked at him kind of strange, going, we know who you are. We've heard a lot of things about you. Why do you want to ride with us? Oh, I'm just on vacation. Okay, whatever. How much would it be if I bought a ticket with you all to Tarshish? They went, well, we're actually going that way anyway. If you pay us this much, you can have a spot on board. Don't have to worry about anything. Meals are taken care of. Don't have to do any chores. Jonah was excited about that because he knew at home his wife was probably doing everything that he normally would. So he reached back in his pocket, got his little money bag out, and pulled out the coins that he would need for the trip. Handed it to the person. They said, "Okay, here you go. Here's your ticket." He grabbed the ticket and he ran. He booked it for that boat as fast as he could. Crew looked at him going, kind of strange that he's running for something that's not going to leave for another 3 hours, but they didn't think anything of it, not realizing that soon Jonah would be one of their worst mistakes and the worst person to have on their boat. Jonah got on the boat and he started looking around, saying, "Okay, where is the best place to hide? Where's the best place where no one will see me, where not even God can see me?" And he found his way down into the hold of the ship. And he went, I am free from everyone. I'm free from God. God cannot do anything. But he forgot something that David wrote, where, even if I go to this place, or if I go to that place, or if I go to the deepest part of the ocean, or even the heights of the heavens, you're there, God. He didn't even think about that. All he thought about as he went and found a place to lay down is, I'm going to enjoy this trip. God is not going to bother me. I'm perfectly safe. There's nothing to worry about. And that was the last thought on his mind as he went to sleep. And oh boy, did Jonah sleep. A few hours later, the crew got everything ready and they cast off the dock. They started the voyage. Problem is about an hour into the voyage, a storm came up that they had never dealt with before. Now, they didn't realize that Jonah was below them, sleeping soundly, probably snoring because his wife knew that he was a very bad snorer at times. But Jonah was sound asleep, being rocked back and forth by the waves that were rocking the boat. But then all of a sudden the boat started going up and down and side to side, and storm came out of nowhere. The sailors didn't know what to do. They didn't even have the language to describe it. But all they knew was that something must be done. And so they started throwing things overboard to try to lessen the weight on the boat, to make sure that they wouldn't be split in two or even the boat wouldn't turn over. No matter how much they threw over, the storm continued to increase. The intensity was even worse. Every single box that they threw over, it seemed that just added to the storm. And they were scared. These were sailors that had been on the sea for 20, 30, some 40 years. And they had no idea what to do. So the captain told all the men to gather together, and he sent one of the crew throughout the boat to make sure that there was no one else. And then the captain scratched his head and said, where's Jonah? I know that he was here on this boat. Where did he go? I'm going to go have to find where he is. I know that crew person's not going to find him. So the captain starts looking and looking and looking, and he goes down the steps into the hold, and he finds Jonah sound asleep on some sacks. Probably some sacks of food that they were going to be using in the next couple days. And he goes to Jonah and shakes him awake, and it actually took 20 minutes to shake Jonah awake because Jonah was so tired. He was so into sleep that nothing was going to wake him up. But finally the captain woke him up, and the first thing that Jonah saw and the first thing that he heard was seeing the captain's face white as a sheet, and the captain saying, "Jonah, what are you doing down here? Don't you know what's going on?" Jonah looked at him and laughed, thinking that the captain was joking, and said, "Well, how could I know what was going on? I've been sleeping. What have you been doing?" Captain's like, "You're not getting this. You feel how the boat's shaking? We're dealing with a storm that we've never dealt with before." Now Jonah started getting scared because he knew. He knew what was going on. He knew that him running from God was actually the reason why these people were in the predicament that they were in. But what he didn't realize is that while he thought he was running from God, he was actually running into God's plan. The captain grabbed Jonah by the arm and dragged him up onto deck into the circle of where everybody else was gathered and said, "Okay, now here's what we're going to do. We are going to cast lots and we're going to find out who it is that is the troublemaker." So the captain pulled his bag of tiles with everybody's name in it, and he shook it up, and he threw out the tiles. Tiles landed on the deck, and all of a sudden they looked down, and Jonah's tile was face up. Jonah wanted to run, but he knew that he couldn't get out of that circle. Right at that time, he heard God's voice speak to him, telling him that he needed to tell them what he had done and who he was. So Jonah took a deep breath and he said, "You know, guys, I'm the reason why this storm is going on." They're like, no, you can't be. Because you can't be that important that one of the gods would be trying to make a storm like this intense. And Jonah looks at him and says, "No, you don't understand. You know that my name is Jonah. You know that I'm a prophet of God for Israel. But what you don't know is that God told me to go to Nineveh. And I didn't want to go. And I'm running from God, heading to Tarshish, the opposite way, the opposite end of the world, because I don't want to do what God asked me to do." Right at that time, one of the sailors stood up and said, "Jonah, how dare you? We know who your God is. We know he's the true God, the God of the heavens, the God of the earth, and the God of the seas. How can you even dare to run from God? How can you even think that God's not going to see what you're doing?" But even more than that, and as he was about to get this out, Captain held up his finger and said, "Hold on just a second. How is it, Jonah, that you decided to put myself, my boat, and my crew into trouble?" Oh, Jonah was so sorry that he did what he did. Tears were streaming down his cheeks because he knew that he had done these men wrong. And he knew that he had to do something. So he turned to the captain, he turned to the crew, and he said, "Okay, here's what you can do, and everything will be okay. What I want you to do is I want you to take me and grab me and throw me overboard. The moment that I hit the sea, everything will be calm again." Captain and the crew looked at him and they were so scared. "Oh no, if we do that to you, then your God will do something even worse to us. We can't even think about doing that." And so they all jumped up, throwing more things overboard, thinking, well, if we just lighten the boat a little bit more, then we can row to shore. But it didn't matter what they did. Everything continued to get worse. And the next thing they heard was Jonah's voice crying above the storm, saying, "Remember, guys, throw me over and the storm will stop. God will protect you." Captain took a deep breath and he said, "Well, Here's what we're going to do. We'll do this. And he looked up to heaven and he said, Lord, don't hold us accountable for this man's life. So they grab Jonah and they start to swing him to and fro. And oh, Jonah, we're so sorry. And they throw him overboard. Jonah was about to hit the waves when all of a sudden he heard a whistle blow. Whale coming! Whale coming! All they heard was a splash. And Jonah seeing darkness, not knowing what was to come.